In this lecture, we'll clamp both our X and Z movement for our player. Before we get too far ahead of ourselves, let's actually get a better looking skybox, just so we don't have to be staring at this default Unity skybox any longer. Pop on over to the Unity Asset Store and just find a skybox that suits your needs. I'm going to go ahead and use this Midgard skybox. It's got some really cool cartoony type skyboxes that I think fit our aesthetic really well. I'll leave a link in the resources tab down below if you'd like to use this exact same skybox, but if for whatever reason this skybox is no longer free in the future, feel free to use whatever skybox you'd like. I'll go ahead and open this up in Unity. And I'm just going to go ahead and import all of the skyboxes inside of this package just so I have a few different options. With all of that imported, I'll go ahead and close that window, head over to my Assets folder, and I'm going to just drag this newly downloaded La Finca skybox into my Imported Assets folder. You don't need to do this part, but I'm going to create a third-party assets folder just to make sure I'm not accidentally redistributing third-party assets on our online repo. And I'll go ahead and drag this La Finca asset in my third-party assets folder. Let's go ahead and open that up, choose a different skybox that just suits my needs. I think they're all super cool, to be honest. I'm just going to try on a few for size. I think this one right here looks really cool to me. It's Midgard 12. With that selected, I'm just going to also rotate it in a way that just kind of lines up with the direction we're running to something that looks a little bit aesthetically pleasing. We're not going to be able to see that mountain. Maybe something like right there would look pretty good. Let's go ahead and hit play. Yeah, I'm pretty satisfied with that for now. While we're on the train of thought of just sprucing things up, let's also head into our chunk prefab folder, give that a double click, and I'm just going to also add some walls to both the left and the right of each individual chunk prefab. So let's go into my GDTV assets, the prefabs folder, and I'm going to go ahead and find one of these walls. You could probably use this one here, this pillar looking one here, or even this sort of triangular wall one as well. Feel free to use whatever you'd like to make yours look unique, but I'm just going to keep it relatively simple. And with this blue arrow pointing this direction, I'm going to go ahead and add two different walls, childing it directly to my model empty parent game object. With that selected, I'm going to head over to my right in my inspector and just delete my mesh collider. I'm going to go ahead and add a default box collider to that, just to make sure I'm using a primitive box collider instead of that complicated mesh collider. I find that to be a little bit more successful when we import our different falling physics objects in our scene and having everything bouncing around a little bit better. Stretch it a little bit just on the Z and reposition it just so it's roughly on one side of my wall. Let's see, am I even positioning this the right way? Nope. So let's just rotate that 90 degrees on the Y-axis. Very cool. And then just once again, positioning that properly to be about right there or so. I'm going to resize that to just be roughly the size that I want. I've got it on the roughly -5 on the X side. I think I could actually probably scoot that over just a tad more perhaps. Maybe let's just try -5.5, see what that looks like. Yeah, I think that actually looks pretty good. Let's go ahead and duplicate that. And I'm going to shift that over to +5.5 on my X value on my transform. Let's just kind of make sure that's roughly lined up correctly. It probably doesn't even need to be too precise, to be honest, as long as there's not really overlap in between chunks. Let's just kind of see what that looks like. Yeah, not bad. I'm seeing a little bit of just overlap here on this mesh right here on my left. I'm just going to actually adjust that in ever so slightly. I think what I'm seeing is this little bad boy right there. So this guy right here, I'm just going to slide it ever so slightly over, just so I'm not actually getting that overlap on our mesh. I think maybe even if I just lift it up, it would look a little bit better. Nah. Let's actually just change that to, let's see, -5.3. So -5.3 on the left. And then to make sure that that's even on the right side, I'm going to change that to +5.3. Again, you don't need to be too precise. It's not all that important. As long as our player has a lot of room to run around for now, that would look just fine. Let's press play one more time. And yeah, not bad for now. I'm just going to reposition my camera ever so slightly so it has a little bit of a better view, angling it a little more down, positioning it just a little more up. I don't want to be too privy about it, but I'm just seeing a little bit of a gap there. It's going to drive me nuts if I don't fix that. So let's open up our prefabs folder one more time. Grab my two walls, and then I'm just going to slide them both barely down just a little bit, just to eliminate that little bit of a gap I was seeing on the left. Ah, much better. I can sleep easy now knowing that gap isn't there. Cool, I think that actually looks really good for now. Let's open back up our player controller class and clamp our movement to kind of fit that aesthetic of the walls that we just built. So opening up our player controller, which will introduce us to this lecture's challenge, which is going to be clamp our player movement. Use f.clamp to clamp our player's movement on both the X and the Z value. I'll make sure to leave a link to the Unity documentation down below in the resources tab if you need a little bit of a refresher on how to properly use clamp. Pause the video now and I'll see you back here in a few moments. Welcome back. At the very top of our player controller class, let's define two different floats for both our X and our Z clamp values. So serialized field, float, I'll call 1 X clamp, and I'll just define that and initialize it at something like 3 to start. And I'll go ahead and duplicate this entire line by pressing Shift, Control, and D, and replacing X clamp with Y clamp. Let's scroll down to our handle movement method and implement that correctly. After we define new position, but before we call move position, let's clamp our two movements. So new position dot X, we want that to be equal to mathf dot clamp, and then we just have to pass through 3 values. The first value that we pass through is new position dot X, and then we want to clamp it in between. Well, we can just use negative and positive X clamp. So comma, negative X clamp, comma, positive X clamp. For the Z, we want to do the exact same thing. So once again, I'll just duplicate the whole line by pressing Control Shift D. I can actually just click here to put my cursor at the end of this X, and then while holding Alt and VS Code, I can click here at the end of this X, here at the end of this X, here at the end of this X, delete just once, and then replace that X with a Z. Except silly me, it looks like I made a mistake up top. I just need to replace this serialized float up top, not with the Y clamp, but the Z clamp, even though we're using the Y input value for our movement. All right, and I think we're all set to go. Let's actually go try that out back in Unity and see what it looks like. Hit play and moment of truth. All right, there you go. It actually does properly look like we're properly clamping our movement on the X and the Y, maybe going just a little bit too far and moving up and all the way back. I definitely think my Z movement isn't quite clamped enough. Let's actually just change that to 2. So player Z clamp, change that to 2. And then I'm also noticing my feet are actually just clipping through my ground here a little bit. So what I'd like to do is head back into my prefab, double click this. I want to actually move everything down underneath my model. So highlighting everything underneath model, dragging it down just a tad. That might have even been a little bit too much. Yeah, just a little bit too much. Let's actually just drag that back up just a little bit, press play, just to kind of make sure it visually looks like my king is walking on the very tippy top of the surface. All right, let's see what that looks like. Yeah, I think that looks pretty good now. Does it look like he's moonwalking? No, it's still clipping just a little bit in certain areas, but I think that looks good for now. When you're ready to move on, I'll see you in the next one.